Hello and welcome to another episode of UpGrade with Maria Kay, the podcast where your success, freedom and happiness get a weekly boost. And I am so thrilled that you've taken time out of your, what I can imagine to be a very busy schedule to tend to your very own life upgrade. Whatever area of your life you're currently seeking to improve, whatever area of your life you're not currently happy with. I am so over the moon that you are taking a stand for what you know to be true, which is there's always room for more. There's always room for improvement. That doesn't mean that what we're experiencing now is broken or who we are is broken. Just reconnecting to that very divine fact that you are here to experience the most heightened version of your life and self possible. Now, today is part 2 of a 3-part series that I am absolutely honored to bring you our special guest, Vanille Makwaka, who is sitting right next to me. Now, Van, that we're going to be calling her, is a personal finance author, speaker, and coach. Welcome back, Van.
Thanks, Maria. I'm so excited to be here.
So if you didn't get a chance to tune into last week's podcast, which was all about dissecting money and whether it's dirty or divine, now Van and I got down really deep and dirty into that subject. So if you haven't already listened, do go back. There's a lot of really positive and powerful stuff there. Now, today's topic is a question, really. We're posing the question and we're going to be giving you lots of juicy answers to this question. And I know that it's going to be relevant to many of you. If it's not specifically relevant in the form that we're presenting it to you today, take what you feel is relevant. Take what you need, because it will help to support you, whether it's specific to you or not. And you'll understand when I pose the question, how can spiritual people charge their worth? Now, really, let's just get one thing clear. We're all spiritual. Every single one of us, whether we know it or not. Yes. For many, many years, many of us tend to be moving through this life really by default. We're manifesting by default. We're co-creating by default without being aware of it or conscious of it. So this really will apply to you whether you're just moving into your spiritual path or whether you've been on there for a long time, whether you're exchanging a service or a passion for money, or whether you're just doing a 9-to-5 job. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to be relevant to you. But to make it really clear, we are all spiritual by nature. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. So Van, would you like to kick us off? And I know that we've talked very in depth about how money is energy, and we touched on it in part 1. What is there more that you can contribute to that subject?
Well, I think that because money is energy, and I know a lot of spiritual teachers talk a lot about this vibrational frequency that we're on, but energy attracts energy. So like attracts like. So often we will attract the people that think the same way as us or feel the same way as us, and we'll only be able to attract what we've asked for in the universe. So for the energy to come back, we must have opened ourselves up and asked for that. But what I find with most spiritual people, myself included, is that I sometimes get into this void of like, but people don't have any. So if I'm asking for that much, I'm actually part of the problem. I'm bankrupting people. And recently it just hit me that actually that had nothing to do with other people, but everything to do with me. The fact that I was in scarcity mode, that I'd often operated out of a scarcity mindset. So it would be hard for me to charge, as I was telling you, Maria, that I deal with a lot of corporate clients. So sometimes I'll go into meetings, and with corporate clients, you can charge 10 times more, because instead of dealing with one individual, I'm dealing with hundreds of people at a time. And so you have the right to ask for a lot more because you're giving way more attention for the day or for the few hours that you're actually doing that. But even before they asking me for my price, there's a part of me that's already discounted that, no matter what the corporate client is. And often I'm dealing with bankers and people that are in the investment, clients that are in the investment industry, so corporate clients that are in investments. But then there's this part of me that thinks, the department probably doesn't have the money to afford me, then I'm discounting it. And what I do in that moment is, even before opening up my mouth, I've already decided that they can't afford my price or afford me, in which case the way that I approach them when it comes to mentioning my price and selling myself or selling my products and services is totally different to how they would approach, is totally different to how I would approach them if I really saw them in their highest light. So saw that they could afford it, really understood what the balance sheets and the income statements really meant when I look at their profits. And it's the same, I think, when we're approaching our clients individually as spiritual healers. We often go, oh no, but it feels wrong for me to charge that person. I shouldn't actually charge that person any money. I should just do this work for free because they can't afford it. And what we're doing in that moment is we're seeing the person in their most powerless state, instead of holding the vision of them as divine, and understanding that because they are divine, they are able to attract what they want into their lives. And that means also attracting the price that we've set for them. But also it means, beyond even just thinking of energetic attraction, it also means that they are capable, practically capable of making the money that they need to be able to afford our services. So we're actually in that moment projecting our scarcity mindsets onto the clients. And I know, like I said, I've done that several times. And even with corporates that have incredible profits on their income statements, I'm already, no, they can't afford it.
And that really brings it back to a very simple way of looking the world and life and people, is that we're all the same. We all have the same capacity, the same abilities to manifest, to create, or to destroy, right? Yep. And again, bringing it back to what was touched on last week, we are responsible for ourselves. Yes. So if we can, in that moment, see the person or the group of people that we're having that conversation with, that money conversation with, right? And see them in their purest form, which is abundant and connected to source, the source of everything, the source of love and energy. And as we said, money is energy. And I know that's easier said than done, but sometimes simply being willing to change our mind is enough. Is enough. We don't have to handle it all in one day. We don't have to nail it all and be this super competent person in the arena that we're working in one day, just displaying a willingness. So what is your worth? How do you decide what you're worth? And it's not always easy to go with your first initial instinctual figure, right? Let's say that you are a Reiki practitioner, or you are an EFT practitioner, or the list could go on and on and on. Or you may also be a coach like Van and myself, right? And you have the opportunity to have a conversation with a potential client, and you have a figure in your mind, A little bit like what you've just described, Van. Yet, even before you've got to the end of the conversation or to the part where you're going to talk money, you've already discounted. So what is it that stops us from staying true and honouring that initial figure that has come from us? Now, as Van believes, she works a lot with the spirit of money. Some people work with money guides. Some people simply tune into their intuition. Whatever form it's going to take for you, I'm going to urge you to trust, first and foremost. Trust. And of course, we're going to add a little bit of practical in there as well, where you may want to go and do a bit of research. What are people charging? It's a little bit like if you had a fast food takeaway place on a street where there were 5 other fast food takeaway places, right? You'd probably want to get a bit of an idea of what the other places are charging, right? And then you can make your decision. But always, always, always fusing it with that initial figure that's come through from your very sacred inner being. And then once you've got that figure, whenever you are tempted to discount, start to look at the reasons why. Now, Van's already mentioned some of the reasons for her were they don't have the money.
Yes.
They haven't got the money. It's impossible that they won't be able to pay. And then that also feeds a fear that what if they don't have the money to pay the desired price, then maybe I should come in at a lower price so I don't lose the client.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we ended last week's session talking about trust and surrender. So this is where I'm going to invite those two elements right back into the conversation and ask you to also embrace trust and surrender. And one for us as well, Van and myself, because to let you into a little secret, well, it's not a secret, that doesn't matter how far you go on this journey, the money issues or money stories that you think you've dealt with all those years ago, they come back in different forms. In fact, I was joking earlier on that they come back in all different colours. And once you've dealt with the red version of the issue, you'll then be dealing with the pink version of the issue. And that's just the way things go. We're human beings with multiple levels, right? And as we peel back the levels and the layers, so too will we be faced with the aligned version of that particular situation or issue. So staying true to the price that we have decided. Now, a little inside tip is sometimes we have to work our way up. Okay, we have to work our way up. And sometimes it looks like the final figure may not come into play until 12 months later, right?
Yes.
And you may have to discount, but give yourself permission to discount. And it could go something like this, right? I will, for the next 6 months, charge this price. Let me give you a figure. Say I'll charge $100, but this time next year, in 12 months' time, I will be charging $250.
Yes.
Okay, and just allow yourself that growth period, and inside of that period of time, you will get to work to improve your beliefs. So move from limiting beliefs to supporting beliefs, to clear any of your internal money blocks, to rewrite your money story, but to also clasp onto and intertwine yourself with that very deep knowing that money is divine, money is limitless, and each and every one of us have access to the same pool of money that the next person does. So it may require that in that period of time, while you're growing into your authentic money goal, or what you're authentically going to be charging for your services, that you spend some time in the past. Not too long. We don't want to spend too long there.
Yes.
But I always recommend that spending some time exploring what or where the root of some of your money blocks or some of your money issues may lay. Now, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm going to mention it because it's very worth mentioning. Sometimes our money blocks actually have their root in a past life. Now, I've said this before in previous podcasts. It may not be something that you are comfortable believing in or even thinking or talking about. But if you are, then it's there. It's there for you to explore. There's so much information out there and so many very, very well-equipped people to help you do that. But spending some time in the past, and this is exactly what I had to do over the many, many years of my money upgrade. And one story in particular is a really profound one, and it took me a long time to actually come back to it. That in my mid to late teens, I started a babysitting business. I was very good at it. I enjoyed it very, very much. And I had some great connections in some 5-star hotels. It was when I was living on the island of Cyprus. And I had some great connections. And I was able to, as Van has already mentioned, charge really great prices because of the setting, because of where it was. And I thought nothing of it. Thought it was absolutely amazing, actually. I loved money. I'd had no problem charging money. And it felt really, really great to be exchanging my time and energy for a good reward. Yeah. Okay. And then a relative asked me to babysit her children. And of course, I charged her the same rate. Now, some could call it naive, some could call it charging what I was worth. So there's two sides to see that, really. And then soon after began this big kerfuffle in the family, this big backlash. And the questions that were being thrown around and the disputes that were being thrown around were, how can Maria charge her relative, her cousin, the same amount as a stranger? And there were judgments and there were strong opinions, and then began the shame and the guilt on my part. Huge embarrassment. Why hadn't I thought of that? How could I possibly have gone down that route? How embarrassing. Now, looking back now, and it still sits inside my physical body now and again, but it's definitely on its way out. But looking back now, I was in the right. I was right. If that's what my inner being was guiding me to do, then I was right. And the reason I share this story for you now, it's for two reasons, actually. One is because I want you to trust your intuition and cut yourself off from any of the negative chatter that might be around you.
Yes.
Right? Number two, pay special attention to the circumstances and the past events that you may be trudged through that may seem really insignificant, right? Because to me, that was like a nothing for so many years until I began to ask in my meditation and in my daily practice for guidance, for revelations, for information. So number one, trust yourself and don't listen to the naysayers. Number two, be willing to go a little bit deeper on your explorative journey, because there are very often absolute gems that will assist you in moving forward. Have you got any stories, Van, that you could share?
Yes, I mean, for me, I wasn't aware of this until recently, just a few months ago, before arriving in Goa, just how traumatic the failure of my first company was. To be honest, I'd never really failed at anything before I started a company. And, all these stories that all companies fail, etc., that had never really resonated with me, because often whatever I'd put my mind to, I'd always achieved. So this was the first thing that I put my mind to, and it hadn't worked out well, and it actually led to me being 60,000 US dollars in debt, totally depressed, no way out, living on credit cards. So it was just this major disaster, very traumatic for me. And I realize now that there was a huge part of me that felt that people will never pay my price. No matter what price I put on there, people will never pay because they can't afford it, or if I stayed, and then here's a biggie that I believed for the longest while, that if I actually say what I am truly worth, people will see me as being greedy and not being there for the work, but being there just for the money. And that for me was like, it's wrong to be there for the money. So there was also that underlying belief that it's wrong to be just there for the money. I have to prove that I'm there for the work. And the way that I prove that I'm there for the work is by not charging as much. So totally discounting what I believed my worth to be. Because like Maria said, you can always hear deep in your heart and in your gut what is the price that you're supposed to charge. And often it's not very far off from what everyone else is charging. But then there's all these other things that tell us that that's wrong. So for me, a huge part of that was learning to say, okay, this is my price. This is what I charge. And I openly now say it, especially to corporates and to everyone. And actually, as soon as I made that decision, Maria, it became really crazy, because then I was invited to this convention where all the top speakers in South Africa had to state what their price was in public on stage, so that all the corporates and all the booking agents would know. And I just happened to be on the stage when they were asking that question. Was that coincidence? And I kid you not, I was sitting there and every speaker is going before me and naming their price. And mine was pretty average. I mean, there were others that were naming like insane prices, but I felt like, oh my God, they can afford to name that price. They've got a name. They've been doing this for years and years. And I was the youngest speaker there. So everyone was like twice my age. So they had these years of experience. And then I thought, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to say it. And there was no way to escape it because everybody was proudly naming their price.
Did you do it?
I did.
Yes.
The universe put me on the spot and I named my price. And as soon as I named my price, the MC, for some reason, decided to comment on my price and said, actually, what Van has named as a price is the perfect price for where she is in her life, given her experience, that she wrote the book, all this. And it wasn't, and in the end, it felt like, wow, I've gone through this whole battle within myself on that stage for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes as everyone's naming their price. And here this guy just says, anti-climax is the perfect price. So I realized in that moment that our fears with money are what stop us from charging our worth. And what we think is extremely high and awful is actually for the next person probably logical and okay and quite practical, but it's all within us. It was my fear of judgment that held me back for years from actively and openly saying my price. And I'd forgotten that story about the public naming of the price. The universe will do that to you.
It's an awesome story. Absolutely. So a lot of what holds us back as conscious spiritual beings in charging our worth is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of being deemed greedy, fear of feeling uncomfortable in ourselves, feeling shameful, feeling guilty, even if those feelings aren't true. They feel absolutely awful. And to be really, really honest with you guys, the only way to get over that is to move through it. So that whole thing, and it's what I speak about all the time, get used to feeling uncomfortable.
Yes.
get used to it and get used to operating from that slight discomfort. Of course, we don't want you writhing on the floor in pain, but we do want to have the ability to move forward despite the fear and the discomfort. And often that will include hearing the word no. Now, this is where I'm going to get a little bit tough loving and tell you that you need to get over it. We all need to get over hearing the word no. Now, whether that be from a client saying, no, I can't afford to pay you, or no, I won't pay that much. I've had it all in the past. I've had people say to me, actually do kind of like a money saving thing in front of me on a call. Oh, well, I found someone who charges less and gives more coaching time, blah, blah, blah. And actually I had to then go in and look at my own stuff. Where am I trying to money save? Where am I trying to? Very often what's presenting in front of us is always an opportunity to reflect back, go inside and look at, where is my money mindset at today? Yes. Right? So hearing the no is paramount. Hearing the no, in fact, I've got a little saying, the more no's you hear, the closer to the yeses you will get. Yep. Right? Yep. And also when you hear that no, asking the very powerful question, what is it in me that just co-created that? Yeah. Okay. And that leads us on to the biggie. Absolute biggie, money mindset. Now, if you listened into last week's podcast, you would have heard Van and I talk about our money stories just in brief. And I touched on my bankruptcy, I touched on my reliance, the way I'd been kind of brought up, my reliance on money coming from guys, from men, my father, my ex-husband. And Van talked about her own experiences with money and her traumas. So we all go through traumas, and all of the things that we go through, they leave their imprint. And we develop a very strong money story and a very clear money mindset. And I've found in all of the courses that I've taught and the group coaching sessions that I've held over the years, specifically around money, that the really, really big block for many, many people is the topic of sales. Now, anytime you are converting a passion or a soul purpose into a living, there has to be some element of sales in there. There has to be. And I've already mentioned getting used to hearing the word no. But you know what? We want to hear less no's and more yeses, right? Because we want to live in a yes energy. Right? It's more joyful, it's more enjoyable, it's happier, it's easier, it's a heightened place to hang out. So what we also need to encourage ourselves to do, and I'm going to encourage you today to do, is to really understand your attitude and your perception of sales. When someone calls you up, a cold caller calls you up, what goes through your mind? What goes through your mind? Now, we get the opportunity a lot here in India to dissect that. I don't know if it's happened to you, but there are people calling out, sales people and on the beach. And what's been your experience here?
India is incredible for that, I actually don't know how to explain it. It's like people will meet you on the beach and then start talking to you for a little while. Then they'll say, please come see my stall and buy from me. And before you know it, you feel like you really, really want to buy from them because they've built this relationship with you. But also it's very interesting, Maria, what I've seen in India is that I can say no to someone, right? I'll say no. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about. And people will say, well, how much have you got? And what do you really want? So if they really observe what it is that you've been looking at for a very long time, and then they open this room for negotiation. But sometimes it can also feel like the sales are being forced on you. So in India, I've had to learn how to say no and be comfortable with it. So I've also learned that part of learning how to receive a no in business is that I also have to learn how to be comfortable to say no to other people, because sometimes I just don't want it, and understand that it's nothing personal. And I think sometimes we think when someone says no, they're not rejecting the product or service, they're rejecting us. And these are two totally different things. Maybe it's not the right thing for them, or they don't want it, but then we're also very tempted to then discuss to the point of no return, kind of like discount our services and our pricing. And I see that happen a lot in India. But I also suspect that what I've also noticed in India is that when I do eventually negotiate to a price that is very much lower, some of the women have said to me, "Oh, I give it to you at an Indian price." So actually there's two separate prices. When they gave to me, they were giving it when they were selling to me, they were selling at a foreign price, but they do have a price that they won't go below. So maybe that's something that we can also learn from people in India, is that that there's a price that you just will not go beyond. That's the threshold as a salesperson. So you can also operate from that paradigm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That ties into what I was saying earlier about creating that top kind of ceiling of what you want to eventually get to in the next, say, 12 months. You can play around with time frames, but having that non-negotiable lower level too, and allowing yourself that growth room, right? Because I think selling an actual product or an item is very, very different to actually selling your services. Yes. So let's be clear on that, because there's so much room for guilt and shame and fear of other people's opinions. And also there's that open space and question mark of, what am I getting? What are you going to do? Put your hands on me for an hour? And what's that going to do? And as spiritual beings, selling our skills and abilities, and whether we've studied or not, right? Yes. It's very difficult to give an explanation, right? And show it in kind of like a bullet point format, what you will receive, what you will get at the end of it. So there's a lot of confusion and grey areas there. But what I encourage you to do, and the only thing I can really encourage you to do, is get stuck in, jump in, and you'll hear the no's. Your limiting beliefs will come up and they will mess around with you and they will give you grief. You'll feel shame and you'll feel guilt. You'll have to revisit old patterns and stories and do whatever you can to clear them. All of that is a given. But the one thing I have to say to you and encourage you to do is keep going. Whenever you hit a stumbling block, whenever somebody says no to you, whenever you had a really, really low month, do not give up, because your inner being brought you to where you are today. Brought you to where you are today because it's where you were supposed to be. And along the way, all you need to do is be present and willing. And that is all. That is the full stop to this segment this week. And until next time, Van and I are wishing you as much love